Another city where those immigration operations are set to ramp up, New York City. This is part of President Trump's plan to launch that immigration crackdown targeting major cities like we've seen already: Chicago, Los Angeles, Washington, D.C. NewsNation's Marcus Espinoza is live for us in Manhattan this morning. Marcus, this isn't the first time ICE officials have been in the city, but what can we expect this time around?
Hey, Brooke, good morning. Yeah, you mentioned it. Not the first time they've been here on Canal Street. This place is linked to vendors here selling those knockoff handbags, any sort of designer clothing or bag that folks like to pick up on the cheap there. This street is known for that. This is also a place where police and immigration enforcement have had a heavy presence. We expect that to happen once again because of the border czar Tom Homan announcing that announcement that they will be once again in New York City here and will be cracking down on immigration here. This is something that they've made extremely clear and something they're planning on doing because New York City is a self-described sanctuary city. And Tom Homan said this is a place where they are going to focus their efforts on because of that, and that this is a place that deserves that particular attention, trying to crack down on illegal immigrants, especially with those with criminal backgrounds. Last time they were here, 9 arrests were made. A majority of those individuals were from West Africa. Meanwhile, the New York Immigration Coalition released footage this week of an ICE raid on a home in Queens that happened on November 13th. The organization claims the agents did not identify themselves or provide a warrant, and then pointed guns at a mom and her 4 children. They also say ICE was looking for a person who did not live at that address. DHS denies they did anything wrong here. 911 calls were made because neighbors thought this was actually a home invasion, which led to confusion where 2 NYPD officers were suffered minor injuries in that particular scuffle there as well. So the recent raid in the home in Queens has raised questions about the conduct there of ICE agents. And so if that presence increases again here, certainly a concern for residents, Brooke.
And Marcus, New Yorkers were bracing for what could happen in that meeting between President Trump and Mayor-elect Mamdani. Illegal immigration was also a major talking point between the two of them. What are New Yorkers saying about that this morning?
Brooke, you did a great job covering it this morning, and it's really surprising. I think everybody has that same reaction from that meeting between the two, and I think it's just fascinating to look at from a macro perspective. But they actually agreed on quite a bit, and I think that's the surprising part. They agreed on the fact that crime is an issue, and it's something that they want to take care of also, both individually and then together. Which is funny because in the past, the president has threatened to withhold funding from the city if Mamdani was elected. And then in return, Mamdani has been a vocal critic of ICE's expanded raids in the sanctuary city, as well as the administration's surge in deportations. Though the two did not get into details of their discussions, they did seem to agree that tackling crime was indeed a major goal.
The concerns that many New Yorkers have are around the enforcement of immigration laws on New Yorkers across the 5 boroughs, and most recently we're talking about a mother and her 2 children, how this has very little to do with what that is.
What we did is we discussed crime. More than ICE per se, we discussed crime. And he doesn't want to see crime, and I don't want to see crime. And I have very little doubt that we're not going to get along on that issue.
Brooke, they made it clear that they agree on proposals of one another, and also Trump said that he would feel comfortable living in New York City under this new administration, even as a billionaire.
Okay, Marcus Espinoza live for us in Manhattan this morning. Marcus, thanks so much.
And how we get better. Ken Cuccinelli, former acting DHS secretary in the first Trump administration. Miles Taylor, former DHS chief of staff. Good to have you both. Ken, you know, my big complaint, not so much with CBP, because they're working under the auspices of ICE, and ICE is running the overall administration of this. Put out the data. It's not enough to have Tom and Homan say, I look at the data every day. These are all bad guys. You know, non-bad guys are the exception to the rule, not the rule. Show us. Why is that so hard?
Well, it's not a small feat to gather everything up on a rolling basis. nonetheless, I agree with you as a general matter. The real question becomes, what's the timeline for a regular expectation of data releases? And I think the American people expect that. I expect that. So I don't think there's anything unreasonable in that request, Chris. And obviously, they've been putting data out, but it hasn't been on the timeline that maybe the U.S. news media would like. When I was there, it was a monthly breakout, and it would roll in a week or two after the end of each month. So about every month, you were getting a month's worth of data.
Right.
That seems entirely reasonable. It's also the basis on which the agencies are already operating. So it fits with their operational tempo already. So I don't think there's anything unreasonable in that request.
Right. Here's what's changed, is what's on the screen right now. Right, Miles? That when Ken was in there, we didn't have everybody shooting them, coming into places they don't usually go and doing things we don't usually see, and then saying, well, it's all justified, but then we don't see the data for 3 or 4 weeks. That doesn't work. If you're going to justify an operation like this, you got to put it out in real time. I'm not justifying violence towards the officers, okay? That's absurd, illegal, and un-American. But what do you think about the style and choices of enforcement we're seeing from the federal government?
Well, first I would say, Chris, the data is showing that someone here is lying, because in the past couple of months, data has shown that the plurality of people in custody have no criminal record. We were told that this nationwide
other than being
operation,
illegally in the country.
Right.
Other than being illegally present.
That's a crime.
But we were told that the priority was going to be criminal aliens. Ken dealt with this just like I did at DHS, and we did not at the time consider those people to be the criminals that we were prioritizing. Not just everyone, but the criminal aliens who've done bad things, dangerous things, endangered American lives. So the data is showing us that no, the administration is not going after those people. They originally told us, and what we said we were going after in the first Trump administration. But to your question, Chris, vandalism against law enforcement, never acceptable. But the temperature is also being turned up by this administration. Yeah, there are a handful of protesters slashing tires, but when you are slashing the Constitution to prosecute this campaign, you're intentionally provoking people. We've seen hundreds of Americans arrested as part of these efforts, which is not what should happen. We've seen people at the White House, officials threaten to suspend due process and habeas corpus. What is that? Why are people at the White House saying that? And we've got folks saying that the protesters are terrorists, okay? We've got them equating protesters to al-Qaeda when the vast majority of people protesting ICE are protesting peacefully and under their First Amendments. This administration, the White House,
being referred to as terrorists. Look, you're not arguing this on a fair and objective basis, Miles. The people who are referred to as terrorists are the ones who are attacking vehicles and personnel. The only American citizens who've been arrested are the ones who've attacked federal agents, and they should be arrested for that. Nobody's rounding up citizens. That's BS. No citizens are being deported. They're not being detained, except here we see one who was attacking federal agents. I recognize that picture. So, that's a legitimate and frankly ought to be a prioritized aspect of the use of federal manpower in this whole set of operations. Yes, it's not al-Qaeda, but violence for political purposes is the definition of terrorism. And that's a lot of what we're seeing here.
All right, to the immigration crackdowns happening across the country. ICE recently arresting tens of thousands in places like Dallas, Miami, Chicago. But it's interesting, those immigration-related arrests are unusually low in the Pacific Northwest. NewsNation's Allie Bradley is live today in Washington State, joins us now. What's happening there, Allie?
Yeah, well, a lot of the focus is elsewhere right now, Connell. We know that immigration enforcement, we're seeing double digits when we look at other major cities when it comes to that interior enforcement and those arrests. But the long and short of it is data that we obtained shows thousands of arrests, double digits in these other cities. So we're talking about in Chicago, around 17,000 ICE arrests. In Dallas, around 22,000, and then in Miami, about 29,000. And this is arguably a hub for immigration, Miami. We know that's a big hub there. But aside from Chicago and LA, we haven't seen a lot of unrest or a lot of protests break out in these areas with these double digits arrests. But in the Pacific Northwest, which includes Seattle and Portland, we have seen people out condemning immigration enforcement. And that is where ICE has only made about 4,000 immigration-related arrests. Now, one of those recent arrests included a known Sereno gang member. That was up here in the Linden area, which is where we're standing, essentially the northern border, just a stone's throw from Canada. And it was not the first time that they tried to catch this man either. He actually fled in the past. He even rammed an ICE officer's vehicle last month. Now he's in ICE custody facing assault on a federal officer charges. So it's not because of a lack of people living here illegally leading to lower arrest numbers than what we're seeing in other cities. When we look at data from sources, it shows that more than 126,000 people are on ICE's radar here in this region. More than 11,000 are convicted criminals, and more than 27,000 have a final order of removal. Now, that means a judge said, hey, you don't qualify for asylum, you've got to go, but they're still here. So we're talking about 27,000 of those individuals. Now, Connell, this all comes, as we know, the borders are Tom Homan. He has talked about Portland and Seattle many times. He's even visited Portland. We know that they're not surging resources to this area just yet. We do know that some Border Patrol are in Portland as well, but nothing to really show any kind of surge in numbers, Connell. So really interesting to see only 4,000 arrests in this region compared to other big cities. Connell.
Well, speaking of numbers, what about the number of people who are giving kind of a notice to appear? I know you've talked about this in the past and other places, versus the people who actually do end up showing up for those appearances. What are we seeing there?
Yeah, so we're talking about 70% of people aren't showing up right now for their court hearings because they're scared of ICE. We've seen ICE showing up at court, right? So they're not showing up for their court hearings. And despite a lot of money being thrown at immigration, a lot of it is not going to the courts and the legal processes, but rather to detention and enforcement. So we're still seeing a major backlog in these court cases. A lot of these asylum seekers are waiting 4 years to even see a judge. Now, when it comes down to it, 3.8 million pending cases. 65% of those pending cases are tied to asylum claims. Connell.
All right, Allie. Thank you. Washington State, Allie Bradley today. She's in Linden, Washington.
Joining us now for his unique perspective, Jason Hauser, former chief of staff for ICE in the Biden administration. Jason, good morning. So you've called the current operations by the Trump administration volume and optics driven rather than driven by prioritizing public safety or actual criminal threats. So would you mind just right out of the gate expanding on that position, your views on this federal crackdown overall?
Yes, ma'am. I think, good morning. I think the first thing is we've seen this administration has had some successes expanding our border security and lowering the number of volumes of those coming to our border in those areas. But what we see now in this interior enforcement sort of program that they're running is specifically in Louisiana and Minnesota is just a continuance of what we've seen in Chicago and North Carolina and Louisiana, where we're seeing sort of the media blitz over top of the focus on those that actually have final orders of removal and over those that have criminal convictions that actually are the backing away of targeting individuals that actually are could be violent criminals and that put our communities at risk. When you hear the administration saying we're going to target 5,000 numbers, anybody would sort of question just sort of those general numbers of sort of this volume arrests over actually targeting those that have exhausted their pathways within the immigration system and or those that put at risk our communities. And additionally, you're seeing this sort of focus on arrests. And what the administration should be sharing is who's in detention, what is their criminal backgrounds, and what is the individual and who are the individuals that are being removed from the United States that make our communities safer.
So what do you say to the argument, if you're in the country illegally, you are breaking the law?
That's true. Under Title 8 in the immigration law, if you are here without status, you are here illegally. That doesn't make you a convicted criminal, and that doesn't make you a threat to our community. And most importantly, for 40 to 50 years, we've had a broken immigration system that has, been carried out throughout multiple Republican and Democratic administrations. Millions of individuals have sought legal status and pathways to come into this country. Currently, this administration is stripping those away. So it's a bit hypocritical to say, these individuals are here now illegally, when 3 weeks ago you're stripping away their temporary protected status, you're stripping away their asylum status, you're pulling them out of the immigration system itself. What we need is the immigration to finally move away from this sort of fear and optics and this sort of media blitz showing the punitive nature of enforcement, which is actually breaking apart the relationships within federal law enforcement. What we need them to do is come to the American people with Congress and say, you know, there's 14 to 15 million people that are within the immigration system. How are we going to move them through that system humanely? Those that have legal status and can gain benefits can stay and thrive in this country, and those that have exhausted those pathways can be humanely removed.
I got to ask about North Carolina. So there are these immigration agents that were on the ground in Charlotte. They have arrested reportedly more than 130 people. Now, last hour, we had a former police chief who was discussing the operation, and I just want to get your reaction to what was said. Take a listen.
We are one tragic situation away from losing an officer because they haven't been positively identified as a federal agent. And you're going to have a plausible explanation for the death. And until that happens, we have to really hold our breath and pray to God that an officer is not hurt, number one. Secondly, there is going to be, if there has not been already, a couple of incidents of persons being killed by the police.
Geraldo, I mean, I hope he's wrong, but what's your take on that?
Well, you know, I think that first of all, he speaks with great wisdom, the chief does, and he learned it all in a very tough city, Detroit, and I honor him. I honor him for it. You have a situation, though, in North Carolina, which is so gut-wrenching to me. When you set ICE loose on that community in almost an ambush, and to be arresting people and deporting people who are putting decorations on Christmas trees. I mean, what the hell is this? What is this? This is unforgivable. And these masked desperados, who are these ICE, the bottom feeders of law enforcement? If you have to wear a mask to go to work, there cannot be honor in your profession. It is absolutely, to me, the FBI doesn't wear masks, sheriffs don't wear masks, cops don't wear masks, court officers don't wear masks. Everybody, they say that they're afraid of retaliation, but what about everybody else in law enforcement? Why is it only you who are going after people who have a brown tint to their skin? And busting windows out. I understand this vehicle was owned by a citizen. You know, it is appalling to me. And to now terrorize Charlotte, North Carolina, you know, were they invited? I thought that the governor was perfect in his assessment of what's happening. I cannot. The President of the United States has done a magnificent job in stopping the influx of undocumented immigrants, illegal aliens. He has stopped it at the border, zero immigration. Why not have more compassion for those who have been here for years with no criminal records? You know, they're not arresting the worst of the worst. They're arresting Jose and Maria. It is the terror in the Hispanic community. I get so upset about it, Jesse. I've been around a long time, but this is really something that that is not American. This is not where you single out people, and it's like, where's your papers? Papers, please. And it just is to me, history will not forget this. This is appalling. And if I was still friends with Donald Trump, I would tell him exactly what I've just told you, Jesse. There's so much about him that I admire. He's done such a great job in terms of war and peace, in terms of even the tariffs. I back him on the tariffs. I back him on blowing up the dope boats. But when you start arresting people because they have a Spanish accent, it is appalling to me. Absolutely.
No, I understand. I understand about that, and I will say this is becoming a moment that is quite unprecedented in the country, to say the least.
Thank you for watching. Subscribe below and download our NewsNation app right now on your phone, and you will get fact-based, unbiased news for all Americans.